when you said, you made a reference quite a while ago when we were in therapy about that you used the description that I'm an abuser, and not just like that, but when we were talking about things, and I got really upset about that because my thoughts automatically thought that I'm as bad as the person that abused me, and how could you possibly think, you know me very well because we've been in therapy a long time, how could you possibly use that term to describe me? You know that I'd never hurt anybody or anything like that, and it wasn't till you expanded on what you meant by that I was like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But it just my gut reaction was, don't you call me that word, that's a horrible word, and I don't want to be associated with that word. And I sort of understood that you were not saying that I'm going to go around abusing people or be a danger to people. You are looking at how I treat myself, both my body and my mind.
Yes.
And I class that as normal because I've always been like that. But when you said, would you do those things to somebody else? But like, no, never.
And that's what, you know, the as we were talking about, when how the saying goes, how you'd heard that people that have been abused become abusers. And the point of what I was explaining is that yes, that, you know, in lots of cases that's true, because you might not abuse others and you might not abuse somebody else in the same way, but you're abusing yourself in that way. And so you're abusing yourself in where you ram the food down your throat, and it's like, if you imagine doing that to another person, ramming the food out of the bin, like as discussed before, or things like that, or the self-harm that you do through exercise, so you're in pain, and then you have painful massage afterwards, and it's all that pain that you're putting yourself through, and it's like, would you do that to another person? No. Would you make another person work out for as long and as hard as you are, because you feel your body through pain and discomfort, and you always, you tend to attach to yourself through that kind of pain, and that's how you associate with yourself. So you say, well, I normalise that, and it's like, yes, and that's what other abusers do. They normalise it. Society normalises abuse all the time. It's like, so parts of abuse is called, as I've spoken about before, separation anxiety, separating the child from the mother. So we're told these little things that we do in civilised society, as it's named. Don't speak to your child straight away, so you leave it a little bit longer and longer. Well, that just gives a message to the child that it's not really cared about. And so, but we're doing it to please us. The child's born to please us, not the other way around. And then can't wait to get them to school, so they're going to get more separation anxiety. You send them to school, they're going to cry and they don't want to go. It's like they've been given no choice. You go, I'm going to be separated, because this is how this civilised society, as it's been named, deems that's what we should do. So we're going to go to this factual learning machine, and we're going to learn how to be controlled, and then you're going to be controlled and have to deal with everybody else's stuff, so you've got to survive it then. So the child's then having to survive everybody else's stuff, including the teachers, or as one psychologist said, the prison guards. And so then you get more of your rights taken away, such as you can't go to the toilet when you want to go to the toilet, you have to ask, you have to do all these things. So if you think about how you are with yourself, and you normalised it, and society normalises it, then so does abusers. And so, because when you say, well, am I that? And now you understand, yes, because I do those things to myself. I do abuse my own body, and I don't abuse somebody else's, but I do actually abuse mine. And sometimes, if you imagine if you had somebody else in your life, then how would you think your behaviour would impact on them? and giving them time. Well, I haven't got time for you because I've got to go for my run, and I need to go to the gym, and my time's spent so focused on my illness. I really don't have this time for you. So then, if that was say a child, then that child would suffer neglect because they know that you have other things that occupy you that come first, and that's what we do with each other. We might be so focused in on our illness that we don't really have time for society because it's taken over. That what happened to us is taken over, and we can't seem to leave it. So that's where it is.
It's when you were speaking, I was thinking about how we give it labels. So it might what I'm doing to myself might be given the label self-harm or an addiction or self-sabotage or an eating disorder and those kind of things. It's trying to give a label to it but when you look down to it, I am abusing myself. And why would I know I want to do it. I know what to cause. I seek out ways to cause myself pain. But I don't understand why I do that when I've been abused and that's not nice. Why am I continuing it? Why can't I go, right, I need to be good to myself. I've had these horrible experiences that were nothing to do with me, that somebody did to me. So why can't I just get, right, I need to be good to myself. I need to take care of myself. I've got all the t-shirts saying self-care on and this, that and other. Why do I feel the need, or why do I go to harming myself?
It's like, when you've, the other label that you got is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so how that works is the post is after. So if you people, often deem that as for people who've been in wars and things like that. If you suffer a trauma and you're in the trauma, you don't have to look at it, because looking at something that's happened to you can feel far worse than being in it, or that's how it feels, and that's how it might have been interpreted in a subconscious way, because logically it's not going to be, it's over. But so what happens then if you can't leave that story, if that stays with you, if that experience stays with you, and you can't leave it, that what does that experience say to you? It's what you make meaning of from that experience. I should have done this. I'm to blame. I should have done that. That is what I deserve. I am a good person. And all these things that you've gathered from that experience, all these stories that you've added on to yourself from that experience. And then also your environment that you were in at the time as well. So you're in an environment at the time that says you're the problem. So then you talk, he's not the problem, I'm the problem. And it becomes about you. Why should it happen to you? And that feeling of when somebody does that, when an adult rapes a child, and the child allows feelings of disgust, and might interpret that they're disgusting. So then, because it's inside, because we're feeling these feelings inside, so there are many reasons to, why we react to a certain thing, and then there's lots of information going on. It's the ones that we gather, that we filter in, and then we tell ourselves a story from that. And we don't leave these stories, because if we're, as Freud said, 5 and 6 year old people running around in adults' bodies. So we gather our information when we arrive on this planet of how things work and who we are. We get our information from the other aliens around us, i.e. parents, family members and things like that, about who we are. And people are often telling us, oh, she don't like that. This is what she likes. She doesn't do that. She doesn't do that. Well, no child likes something unless it's in their environment and they're told about it. You don't just like something that's not there. You like things that you're being shown and you dislike things that you're being shown. And we tell stories from them, and people tell us stories about us and who we are and things like that. We're not asked who we are. We're told who we are, depending on where you're born in the world, depending on if you know what religion that you know, or if there's a religion or not. Depends on that shapes who you are. So it's all the information that around you that brings the outcome. And so for you, the outcome was, you know, I'm the bad person, because you got messages about being a bad person. You know, so quite often it was, you know, the child's the problem. Yeah, not the adults that we're the problem. It's the child's the problem, when actually that's not true. And then you believe that of you. You say, well, I'm the problem then. You know, these adults are all doing it because of me, because I'm so powerful that I can make them do that. And quite often adults will say that to a child. You make me stressed, or they'll go, oh, they've stressed me out. And then the child believes that they've stressed the adult out. It's like, no, the adults stress themselves out by what they're telling themselves.
You've pushed me too far.
You've pushed me too far. You have done that to me. Like, this innocent child has done this to you, to an adult. Because the adult, as Freud said, is like a child running around in an adult's body. So if the adult's got unresolved issues from the past, then it becomes the blame game. And instead of taking responsibility for ourselves, we often blame others, including children. No one gets escape from it. So you know, we blame children. I said that wrong. Escape from it. I don't know what I said, but yeah. And so that's what often happens, because people don't put themselves. Even when you go to school, you're there to please everyone, and then you're trying to do your best to try and say, because somebody will tell you who you are. You're good enough, or you're not good enough. You need to wear that. You need to do this, and you're then introduced, you know, into the learning machine, factory learning machine.
And you could do better.
And you could do
That's
better.
What just stuck in my mind when you said that. To put another young person who's not had that experience and feeling that negativity about themselves, they might just brush that comment off. But to me, could do better. It was like, I'm not good enough, but I'm doing the best I can, so there must be something wrong with me.
Exactly. And when you mentioned about a school that you'd seen that were celebrating children that had given 100% attendance, but wouldn't have celebrated, so you would have felt even worse, because for you didn't want to go to school. It was the world was dangerous because you'd already experienced a rape. And so you had that to deal with on top. So then society then says, well, you're just not good enough. So then what are you going to do? And so you've found a form of punishment. But you're in control of it, because that's the only thing that you feel in control of it, although you're not. And
that leads me to another term that you might, putting you on the spot, might want to clarify what it means. I think because, two things, because I don't feel as if I still feel much like that child that have been frozen emotionally at that young age. I feel that now I feel internally still a child, so I still look around at the adults who are in my peer group as them knowing better than I do.
How do they know better than you?
I don't know, but I think they do, and that comes into a thing called, that I've read about, confirmation bias. I look now for things that fit in with my mindset about being a bad person. So I might forget if my mum or somebody says something nice about me, but I will remember and dwell on it if something negative is said about me, or I interpret something negative.
Because that's your battle with the world. So lots of people have confirmation bias, lots of people, because the world becomes about them. So that's why, you know, like I say, like parents might say, they've pushed me too far, or they're stressing me out, or they're doing that to me. It's like, no, they're not. the inside of your mind is doing it to you. Nobody else is doing it to you because you took something in and it's arguing with you and telling you all kinds of things. It's not even you. It's just a recording in your brain that's recorded something. And so when they were young, they might have heard them parents say, "You're stressing me out." So it's like, oh, is that what we say to children? Well, when I have some, I'll say the same. And then some people go the opposite and think, well, if I do the opposite, you know, I'm not like my parent. And it's like, but you're still on the same yardstick. Yeah, and it's like cold and hot are two versions of electricity. And so one of them stings if it feels too cold, and the other one stings if it feels too hot. And so that's what they are. They're still the same. It's just that we determine which one's too hot and which one's too cold. And that's what we do for everything. So you're still working from that same yardstick. So for you, although you say I won't do that to someone else, it's like you're still on the same yardstick as abuse, and so that's why you're still doing abuse. Did that answer your question?
I don't know, I can't remember, but it makes sense. Makes sense, right. Totally.
Okay.
But I think because I'm coming from my personal thing, I'm like going, that makes it sound too easy. That knowing that I can just stop it now and think, oh, I've got to be nice to myself now because I know why I've been doing these things to myself. You know, I'd never put somebody in a scalding hot bath of water, or you know, do trying to think of stuff that I do, you know, and I think never do that to somebody, never force feed somebody, or never starve somebody to brink of death. But I did it myself.
But you would to somebody because you are a somebody.
Yeah.
But in effect, we are nobody. The reality is, people would be offended by that. But we are no thing. We make ourselves into a thing with labels, but we aren't any of it.
So why can't I just stop it then?
Because of your beliefs about, you know, people believe things, you know, when you say, he who said is right and he who said is wrong are both usually correct at that. So, the saying goes, he who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right. Yeah. So if you believe you can get rid of something very quickly, then you can. And if you don't believe it all comes down to belief. If you don't believe it, then you can't. And so that's how it goes. It's about you. So we, you know, people quite often do things for many, many years. So say like you were in a bad job and you disliked the job and it was awful and you just went there and you say, why don't you leave? Oh, I can't do that. Why? Well, it pays money. And it's like, but I can't enjoy my life. Yeah, and that's what they believe. And then some people are in a bad job. Can you leave? I'll leave tomorrow. Don't like it. So it depends on what our beliefs are. And so that's a form of self-harm. If you're staying in somewhere where you dislike, because you kind of go into a place that you dislike, but you might have been used to doing that when you're young. And it's like some people, you know, such as you didn't have a pleasant experience at school and you went there. So then, as you expressed about work, you went to a work and didn't have a pleasant experience, and it's kind of repeating that pattern. And it's you know, so that's what we do. We tend to repeat certain patterns as well.
And I think for some people like me, or me, let me just talk about me because I know me. I've read stuff or seen stuff when they say, oh, when you become aware of what you're doing and you're self-aware, well, then it'll just stop. It's not as easy as that. Do you know what I mean? And what you're describing is that it's very complex. It's not as, because I always used to think, well, I'm failing at it because I'm conscious. I now understand why I harm myself, and I understand where it's come from, and all those kind of things. But yet, I'm still doing it. So I'm trying to understand it more in a way that you're explaining, rather than just when I see it read or somebody saying it. Well, when you become more self-aware, you'll stop things. You won't need those coping mechanisms or whatever. But it's more complicated than that.
Well, sometimes you can when you become self-aware of them, or there might be sometimes when you decide where people are aware that it's not healthy to smoke, or well, a lot of things that we do that's not healthy, but you're aware of it. But it doesn't mean you're going to stop. It doesn't, because once you're aware of it, it doesn't mean that the feeling, you know, the body. We have a series that goes on throughout the day constantly. Think, feel, act, think, feel, act, think, feel, act. So the think, feel, act goes on the majority of the day, and that's the thing that's overcome. It's not conquering the world, and it's not the world that the world's a problem or life's hard. None of that is actually true. It's the recording in our head that we have to overcome that's hard, and so the recording gives emotions in the body, and we're looking at these emotions because you wouldn't elect to get up and think some of the thoughts that you're thinking. You wouldn't consciously decide them. These have been put into your brain because your brain is a recording machine that's recorded what's being said to you and records emotions to go with it. And sometimes we can watch emotions. So they did an experiment years ago with a Dodo doll or Bobo doll, I can't remember the name of it, but and what happened was it was a big blow-up doll, and children watched the adults go into a room and they punched the doll. So children mimicked that because that's how they learn. They mimic what other people do. So and then they got very angry because it brings out an anger. So then we learn, we get angry and frustrated about this, and they go, oh, they're just like the father, they get angry and frustrated about that, and it's like, no, they've just watched the way that they've reacted to it and they've learned that, and that's what we do. We tend to learn things. So you know, for you it's like the same thing, that you've learned actions and reactions. So the think, feel and act is, oh, I'm thinking this and now I'm feeling it, now, you know, I'm compelled to do it, and then I act on it, and that's all subconscious. So you might be consciously aware that you're that you've been programmed with something, or that your brain's doing that, but it's practiced at it. It's had a lot of practice at it. So because it's had a lot of practice at it, how many years do you think it took for you to learn all that?
A lifetime.
That's it. So then, you know, it's like when you come into therapy, if you, oh, well, aren't you done yet in a few weeks? It's like you've spent a lifetime being brainwashed with information that people have told you how the world works. And the majority of what people have told you how the world works isn't true. So because it isn't true, and somebody says, do you know this a lie? It's like, well, how will I live then without it? I want to be in this prison that we've made that we're not aware of. I want to be in that because I don't know how else to be. Because if, you know, when I say to people, drop your name and tell me who you are, I don't know. But there's something inside that must know that you're not that then. If you say, I don't know, because you'd say, I know I am, everybody's told me, but you have a feeling, and you'll look for who you are, and you can't find it. And then that lets you know that you're not that. So, but because you believe that in this play that we're in these stories, they're all series of stories, because you believe that, then it can be difficult to be consciously aware all the time and not go into the program. But it's not doable. It's definitely doable that you can, but you have to practice it every single day. Well, that would seem like hard work when you've got something in your brain that's constantly ticking all the time. Yeah?
And when you're still getting that reinforcement, because you're still in that same environment that you have been all your life, that is that negative space. I know I saw a quote somewhere, it's you can't heal in the environment that made you sick, and so it's...
But is that true?
Yeah.
But it's
it's not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's only true for because you believe it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So it's only true because you believe it. There was a psychologist called Viktor Frankl, and he was in Auschwitz, and he studied people while he was in the prison of war camp, and what he found was those that gave up hope died and those that had hope had more chance of living. And he did, and his family were killed, but he had hope, and he watched this, and he even in those barbaric, inhumane circumstances, he realised it was the inside of him and his beliefs about his environment that depended on his survival. And so when people say things, if we feel that fits for me, then we'll believe it and we'll make it true. But if it doesn't fit for somebody else, and that means that the truth is the same, but a lie changes, and it's only true because we make it true. But ultimately, everything in nature more or less stays the same, but everything about human beings changes. And one generation can see the other generation. So quite often when I was young, it wasn't like this in my day, because we add more to all the time. So a generation will add something more. And so now this generation is, the younger generation is adding in about pronouns or all these things that have been added in. Well, years ago, looking at our generation, it would have been, we didn't behave like this, because that generation can see that generation's madness develop. And then that generation can see that generation's madness develop. Well, what is that madness? It's these stories that we're making up about ourselves by burying ourselves in labels. And we're getting so far from our humanness for who we are. Who are we? Well, we're not taught to be a being. We're not, that's not embraced. That's not be who you are, let's find out who you are. It's be a human doing, which is work. We're programmed to work, and that's what we do. So if you look in your environment, in nature, it's green and it's healthy, and in human beings, it's sick. In fact, sickness is big business, because everything that you see on TV is all about illness, and that's what it's about. And so, we believe then what fits, and we feed each other that as well. So our environment feeds it. TV, when you watch TV, I think maybe 10% good stuff on there, I don't know, or even less, but that's it. And when you put the news on, you might get a fraction of something being good, the rest of it's bad. And we're constantly fed this all the time. What do you think is going to happen? If you feed something bad, what happens to the sea when we feed it junk? Yeah, things start to die and things start to deteriorate. What do you think is going to happen to us when we're doing the same thing to ourselves? So, and then, but you can be in that, but have your healthy bit in there, and that's what Viktor Franklin did. His mind stayed out of it, even though he was still in that environment, and he was able to, kind of study it, and then, give us the information after.
I think there must be some element in that I believe in, because I wouldn't be going through therapy and trying to understand things more and be different. I'd just accept and get on with it.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that when you say trying to understand more, is these things, what you're understanding are about you and what it's like to be a human in terms of how does that make you feel, how did you react to these experiences. What I find odd is, why aren't you taught this in the school? Why do you have to come to therapy to be taught about you? And that is the oddest thing in our environment, is that we're taught about numbers and how to work and to do this job, but when do we get to be us? When do we get to learn about us? And then that can be a discomfort, because what we're doing then is we're chasing something that doesn't exist. Spend our lives chasing to be good enough, and we've boxed ourselves into a little prison, We were already born good enough. But for some strange reason, man thinks it's better than our creator and decides who's good enough and who's not good enough, who decides who's special and who's not special. We have no right to do that. We have no right to do it. But in our illness, you know, like with Hitler, how his brain worked in controlling human beings, and that hasn't stopped. Just because the people's names are Hitler, it doesn't mean we aren't still controlled or manipulated, or, you know, subliminal messages sent to us. It doesn't mean that people are all good now because Hitler's gone. That's absolutely not true. There are good people out there, but equally they're still not. And where we don't learn about us, we learn about work. And that isn't who we are. We learn about objects. We learn about buying and selling, and that's what we learn. But there's no time for us. And then everybody's chasing something to be good enough to get there, to get the feeling of something, to get happiness, to get freedom. Everybody's chasing that. We already have it. We're fooling ourselves to say we don't, because we're not being who we're supposed to be. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Do you want to end there?